Hello and welcome. My name is Dan Rodney, and this is an intro to Figma. Today I'm going to be talking about getting started with Figma, and just a couple things before I get started. This presentation that I have on screen, the link for that is in the video description down below, nobledesktop.com/presentation/Figma. There'll be some useful links that will be in here for your reference. Going through this slide deck here, you can use your arrow keys to go back and forth. You can also use your finger to swipe through on a touchscreen device to swipe through these slides as well for your future reference. My background is in both doing design and coding. I've been doing design in web design, for example, for over 20 years, and I've used a variety of apps over those years, anything from ImageReady to Photoshop to Illustrator, Macromedia Fireworks, Sketch, Adobe XD, and of course Figma. So I've used a wide variety of apps, so I have a different perspective coming into this than maybe somebody that's just getting started, which is one of these apps, and want to get you started using this here. So let me go through here. What am I going to discuss in this webinar? First of all, what is Figma, and importantly, what it can and what it cannot do. Some people have some misconceptions of what they think it can do, and they think it can do certain things that it can't. What the pricing is Figma free? Everybody always says Figma is free. Let's take a look and see if it is. The web app versus the desktop app, which is ways that you can use Figma as either the website or a desktop app. And I'm going to be getting you started, showing you how Figma works in doing design, prototyping, and sharing. And I'll do a brief comparison of how Figma compares to the competing programs Adobe XD and Sketch, which are similar to Figma but made by other companies. And ways to additionally learn more, because we're going to be getting you started with Figma in this webinar, but I can't cover everything in just 1 hour. So getting started. Before I show you actually using the Figma app, which I'm going to be doing in just a little bit, there's a couple things that I think you should know. Some tutorials just skip right over these things, but I think it's important to understand a few things about the way that Figma works before you get started. So exactly what is Figma? It's for designing experiences, graphics, for UX and UI, so web, app. It's a digital design program. Now, Figma, as kind of a company, makes two different products. Figma, which is what most people just call it, they just call it Figma. This part is actually behind the scenes kind of often called Figma Design. So if you see documentation or something saying about Figma Design, they're talking about what we're going to be covering today in this webinar. FigJam is another thing that's made by Figma as a company. FigJam is for doing whiteboarding, and I'm not going to be covering that today. I'm just going to be covering just what's normally called just plain old Figma or Figma Design. But there are two different offerings that Figma has. So what exactly can Figma do, and what can't it do? In Figma, you're going to design the look, the feel of websites, apps, any sort of digital thing. And you're going to be making working prototypes to show clients and developers. And you're going to show them how the design should work, how it should look, how it should animate. And design apps like Figma, Adobe XD, and Sketch, they do not create a final website or app. And that's important. A lot of people think that Figma or Adobe XD or Sketch is actually going to produce a final website or app. That must be coded by a developer, somebody that knows how to do code. It's not going to spit out a final product. What you are doing is you're designing. You are planning what the app or what the website should look like, how it should work, and when it's ready to be built, you'll pass this off to a developer, and they will actually have to write the code to make this thing actually function. And I'm just going to turn off the webcam here so you can see what's behind me in the slides here. So we're designing. We're planning, we're not building final things. Somebody else is going to have to build the final product. I should say, unless you're creating a graphic. Like if you're creating a graphic, of course, the final graphic you can use in something. But in terms of a full website or full app or email or whatever digital product, typically that's going to have to be coded by a developer. And so while we're designing, we're going to be using prototyping features to simulate kind of how this would work, going from screen to screen. And those prototyping features, they're good, but they can't create every type of interaction that you might want to create. So in our design, in our planning, and our prototyping, we're going to try to do as good as we can do to show clients so that they can see what our vision is. We're going to do the best job we can do for showing a developer how it's supposed to work. But anything that Figma can't do, we would just have to explain to a client or explain to a developer. And because we're not building the actual website or app, it's great to be able to get as close to realistic as possible. But if it's something you just can't do with the current level of prototyping features, then you just have to communicate it some other way. So we don't have to be able to build every single thing necessarily. It'd be nice, but we get as close as we can. So a couple terms that we need to understand as we're looking at Figma to fully understand it. They have things called projects, files, and teams. And this is going to affect the level of Figma account you're going to want to create and how you're going to store your files and how you're going to collaborate with other people. So with projects and files, projects are simply their folders. And they call them projects, but they're basically like folders, and they let you group files together in one place, just like you do in a folder on your computer. But projects are only available in teams. And see, this is where there's an important thing, because this is going to affect the free starter plan versus the paid plans. This is why this is important to understand. With a free starter team, so that's the way that they're charging things, is when you have your account, you can create teams, and it's the teams that have to pay. And so with a free starter team, that starter team is one project, meaning one folder, and you only get 3 files in that folder or project. Now with a paid account, with a professional or organizational team, you can create as many projects as you want, and in each project you can have as many files as you want, but you have to pay for that ability. If you're going in for free, you just get one project with 3 files. Now there's other places where you can store things, but when it comes to certain features, you need to do those in a team. So that's going to affect the capabilities that you have. So when it comes to teams, you create and share resources and collaborate on files and projects in a shared team workspace. So there's a team, the projects are in the team, and you're collaborating with other people in that team. And permissions impact how the collaborators can interact with your team. So collaborators being other people that you're working with. On the starter plan or educational plans, plans are both free. The team permissions determine their access to files. So basically the team says who can work with that. On your higher paid accounts, the professional and organizational plans, those are a person's role. So you basically you have roles rather than just blanket team permissions, and that determines if they can edit files that are there. And you can learn more about these kind of details in the Figma help that I linked to. Click that link to read more if you're interested more about that. So why did we have to learn all of that stuff? Because it affects the pricing of things. There is a free starter plan, and when everybody's like, Figma's free, yes, there is a free plan, but that doesn't mean everything is free for everyone. There are limitations. Now, it's a very generous free plan. They give a lot. So you can have unlimited personal files. Personal files are in a drafts folder. The drafts folder, though, you're not collaborating with other people. Those are your files in your account, and you're not working in a team with other people. The team part is where you get one project, and in that project you can only put 3 files, and that's like your folder that's part of your team that you can collaborate with other people on in a free account. So there's not a lot of that you get in the free account. The rest of Figma is free in this, so you get all the design features and everything, but it comes to that there are some limitations that people will run into. So on your professional level, which is a paid account, you get as many files as you want, unlimited files, and you get unlimited version history. You get sharing permissions and team libraries. So, and when I say unlimited files, there's a difference between your personal files that are in your drafts folder with the free plan, you get as many projects and files in each of those projects as you want. So unlimited projects, unlimited files in those projects. So the professional paid accounts are built for team collaboration. There's also a higher level organization, which you get everything in the professional level, plus organization-wide libraries. You get branching and merging, and you get even more features for even more expensive monthly costs. So, so then the question becomes, is the free Figma starter plan, is it good enough? And for some people, it certainly is. You get the design features of the app. You can design, you can export graphics, and you can do a lot. But for people that need to organize your files into folders or projects, as they call them, that you need to collaborate with team members, you need to share team libraries. Libraries are shareable assets like styles and components and stuff. Basically, if you're working with other team members, sharing stuff, and you need to organize your file because you're doing a lot of files, then the free plan is not going to be enough. You're going to have to go for a paid plan. So in terms of cost, just comparing the three major apps here, Sketch is the cheapest at only $9 a month. Adobe XD is just ever so slightly more expensive at $9.99 a month. These are all US prices. Or it's included with Creative Cloud if you already have Creative Cloud, so there might not be an additional cost for you. And then Figma is a little bit more expensive, that it starts with $12 a month. There are more expensive plans, like there's a $45 a month plan and even more, depending on the level that your company wants to get in at. So it starts at 12 and goes up from there for more expensive plans. So once you start paying, Figma is marginally a little bit more expensive, but it's not that much of a difference. It's within $3, so not too much more expensive there. But there's definitely some people that can get by with the free version, and it's a great way to get started and see if Figma is right for you, because you get all the functionality for the most part, except for the team type stuff, which if you're just by yourself, you can get started for free. So it just depends on what your needs are as to whether that free version can work. Now, Figma is different, very different from a lot of the other apps like Adobe XD and Sketch, which are desktop native apps that must be installed on a computer. Figma is a web app. It requires constant internet connection. All the Figma files, they live on the Figma servers. And while you can download a copy, you can never work locally on that copy. To be able to work on that, you have to upload it again. So everything is edited and worked on live on Figma's servers. The only reason to download a file would be to keep like some sort of backup on your own computer, but you certainly can't edit it, and you can't save local files for editing purposes, just to download a backup of something. So if you don't have internet, you can't really do anything. You cannot create new files. You cannot open files, even if you had a local version of it. Figma needs internet always to be able to do things. The one exception to that is if you have a file open. So if you have something open or multiple files open, those files will remain open. You can keep working with those, and the changes are saved in your browser. And from what I've read, actually, even if you close the file, they're still going to be saved. I'm always a little nervous about that, but but when you reconnect, those changes will sync to the Figma website, basically. You basically, if you're gonna, like, let's say go on a plane or something, you've got to open up your files, and if you accidentally close one, oops, you can't open it back up again. So you got to keep those files open, work on them, and just keep them open. But you can't create new ones. You can't open up old ones that you have in your account but you don't have open. So which for a lot of people, not a big deal, because most of the time you have internet connection. But if you are frequently in a place that doesn't have internet, that can definitely be an issue. So there are benefits to being a web app. If you've ever used Google Docs, you know that you can just open up Google Docs and just go into the browser and start working on it. There's nothing to install. Being able to just open up a browser and log into a website and not have to install anything, like you can log in on anybody's computer, just start working, and you don't have to install anything. Now, you don't have to technically, but you probably will want to install something, because if you need access to your locally installed fonts, like fonts that you purchased and put onto your computer, or for example, fonts that are like Creative Cloud fonts, if you're a Creative Cloud member, those are local fonts. The Figma website cannot access those local fonts unless you install something. So you get access to the whole library of free Google fonts in Figma. That's there automatically. You don't even have to download or install anything for that, but you do need to install something to access local fonts here. And so another benefit of being a web app is that you get to see what other people are doing in real time, just like if you've used Google Docs. The files are automatically saved, they're updated, and as you work, you get to see other people, you get to see their cursors moving around, and you get to see their work being done. It's a true collaborative platform, and because it's online and everything's working at the same time, simultaneously on the same file, it's great working remotely with other people, because you don't have to like, oh, let me send you that file and let me save it, and you work on it and then you have to send it back. But pretty much all of the apps these days are like that. Adobe XD and Sketch also can do online collaboration, but it's a little different here because the files live online and are like actually in a browser. So it's a little bit more integrated in terms of being a full online collaborative experience compared to Adobe XD and Sketch. They're very similar, but a bit of a different approach. So then, are you going to use Figma in the web browser, or are you going to use it as a desktop app? You can install a Figma desktop app, and I would definitely highly recommend it. All the features are going to work in both the web and desktop apps, but the web app cannot access local fonts unless you install either your desktop app or the Figma font service. And you can click this link to read more about that. But you have to install something to get access to the local fonts. For me, I'm going to install the desktop app, and so that gives me access to local fonts, even if I'm using Figma in the browser. But you do need to install something to access your local fonts. The reason that I like to install the desktop app is because there's some things that are just a little bit nicer. Functionality wise, you can do all of the stuff in the website, but for example, when you export graphics, if you're in a browser, it has to zip them all up and throw them into your downloads folder. You do not get a choice of where you want to save that file or files, and also you have to unzip them when you're done. But if you are using the desktop app, when you download the files, then you can choose where you want to put them, and they don't get zipped. They just get exported. So that's just, granted, you get the images in the end, you can get the graphics, but to not have to go to your downloads folder, unzip them, it's just a little bit nicer. So it can save you some steps. The other thing is you also will get an automatic tab for each file you open, and in a browser you don't automatically get that. You can open up different tabs for files, but it's something you do manually versus it being automatic. So also, if you're a Mac user, the top menu bar that you normally have in your app, you will get that for the Figma desktop app. They don't give that to Windows users for some strange reason. I don't know why they don't put a menu up there for Windows users, but they do for Mac users. So that does save you an extra click, not having to go into the normal kind of Figma menu. So let me actually start showing you here Figma. And I want to start with the web app versus the desktop app, just to show you a little bit of the experience here. So I'm going to open up a new tab here and go to figma.com. And I've already logged in to my account, so it just goes right into my account. Normally when you go to figma.com, there'll be a login button at the top right. You can click to log in. Now over here, you've got a drafts folder. The drafts folder, those are what they call your personal files. And the personal files, those are the things where you have unlimited personal files. One giant folder called drafts of as many files as you want. Over here on the left, you've got teams. Under teams, this is where you create your team and you have your projects or folders in here. So you only get one project in your free account, and in that project you can only have 3 files in the free version. In a paid version like I have here, you can have unlimited projects with unlimited files in that team, And the team is what allows you to collaborate with other people, where you can share your document, where other people can work on it at the same time. They can share your team libraries. So this is where the kind of collaboration happens versus being in your drafts, where these are just your personal files. Nobody else sees them. These are just in your account. And sure, you can have as many as you want, but you don't have that kind of collaborative side of things, being able to share your team libraries and so forth, and create folders for better organization. So being here in the browser, I can create a new file. So let me just go ahead and click new file there. And so this will get me into the Figma app itself. And I can start to create things. Let me create a frame just real quick here. I'll do that for an iPhone 13 here. And let's say I want to save this file. So I can go up here, click on the name of this file, and I could just call this my first demo file. And if I want to move it out of drafts, I can click on the drafts folder there and put it into another folder. But again, keep in mind that if you're on the free account, you only get one folder, and you can only put 3 files in there. So you'd have to be on a paid account to create all the different folders. Click a little plus button there to create a new project, or otherwise known as a folder, and you can put things into there. But if I want to go back to my list of files, back to that home screen, there's a Figma menu over here at the top left. And this is the Figma main menu, because up at the top here in a web browser, you just have your browser menu. So you have to go back to files if you want to go back to files, or you can do your other features, like you've got your different view options for zooming in and out and so forth. So these are all of your features that normally in a typical desktop app, you'd look at the top of your screen for that menu, but here it's this kind of vertical menu over here on the side. If I go back to files, I can go back to that list of files, and I can see that there is that file. I can double click on it to go back into it. So it's not going to create a new tab for each file that I want to be in. I can open up a new tab in my browser and go to figma.com and do something else. So here I've got one file, and here over another tab I could create another file, either create one or open one. So in a browser, it's up to you to create those different tabs. And when you want to go back from a document back to your list of files, you go to the Figma menu and say go back to files. Otherwise, once you're actually in a file, all the features and everything that you see, the toolbars and the menus and everything here, that's going to be exactly the same as the desktop app. Now, let me switch over to the desktop app for a moment. Go over here to the Figma desktop app, and you'll see that this looks exactly the same. I'm logged in with the same account, and you can see the files already here because I'm logged in with that same account. But because I'm in a desktop app, I have a home button up here, and I also have a plus button. The plus button up here would let me go and create a new design file. So remember, this is Figma design that we're talking about as opposed to FigJam. So I could create a new file that way. I still have this ability to create the new file there as well, but I get another little shortcut up here. And if I double click on a file, that will always open up as a tab. And to go back to my files, I always have this dedicated home button that I can click on. So I can open up different files here, and notice that each one opens up as a different tab automatically. And in the menu here, they don't have back to files in the desktop app. That's one minor difference between the web app and the desktop app. They don't need back to files there because you've got the home button. And the home button is the same as back to files was. So I do like that it automatically creates these tabs, and if you don't want it open, of course you can close it. But having that dedicated home button and dedicated tabs without you having to create the tab yourself, it's just a little bit nicer. You get that, you get access to your locally installed fonts. So all of those things are just little niceties that the desktop app is going to make better in your overall experience. So I'm going to delete this file here. So I'm just going to click on that, hit delete on my keyboard, and now we can get started kind of from scratch here. So you fire up Figma, whether it's the website, whether it's your desktop app here, and you can create a new design file. So I'm going to click new design file, not doing FigJam. I should also mention you can import a Sketch file as well. So if you are switching from Sketch, you can import those. If you're switching from Adobe XD, you cannot directly import Adobe XD, but if memory serves right, I believe that there are online converters that you can find. I think Avocode is the one that has those, but basically I've seen converters where you can convert between pretty much all three of these different file types, and I think you can convert XD into Sketch, and then you could open up the Sketch file here in Figma if you really need to go from XD over to Figma. But I'm just going to create a blank new document here from scratch. Click on New. That's going to open up a new tab. So I'll close up the other one just so we don't get confused with that one. And here we're in a blank new document. Up at the top, we've got our toolbar. And I want to create what's called a frame. Now, other apps call these things artboards. And please forgive me if I call them an artboard, because so many other apps call them artboards that sometimes I just go back and call them artboards, but they are officially called frames. A frame is a container for things. So I'm going to click on the frame tool. Over here on the right, I then see a list of common sizes, common devices. Lots of different things. You can create desktop sizes, tablet sizes, phone sizes. So let's say I choose a phone size here. I click and I now have my frame. Now it's automatically switched me back into my move tool. This is like your general all-purpose selection tool. If I do want to create an additional frame, I can just go back to my frame tool, click on that, choose between my preset, like maybe I want to do a tablet, and I could do a tablet, let's say like this one. So now I've got a tablet, and again, I could go back and do another frame, and let's say I do a desktop now. I could do a desktop. So I've got the three kind of main sizes here. And if I was naming these nicely, I could double click on the name here and give it something instead of a specific device. I could just call it phone. I could double click on it here in my canvas area or over here in my layers panel. The layers panel is going to show you those frames that you've got. You can click on that and rename it there as well. You can scroll around. If you notice there aren't scroll bars here, you can use your scroll wheel if you have one. You can do two-finger scrolling if you have like a trackpad or something. But if you want to scroll around, they do actually have a hand tool here, but I normally just hold the space bar like you do in all graphics apps. When you hold the space bar, you can drag around. You can also do things like on the Mac, you could do Command plus and minus to zoom in. On Windows, Control plus and minus, zoom in. And there's a couple things about keyboard shortcuts that I want to mention when, let's say, zooming in. Let's say you want to zoom in to 100%. There's a zoom menu up here at the top right, so you can see the current percentage of zoom. But if you look at something like zooming to 100%, that is kind of what I would consider a normal keyboard shortcut. Command 0 on the Mac or Control 0 on Windows. But there's some odd keyboard shortcuts that you might not be used to doing. Things like zoom to fit, which would take whatever you've got on your screen and just zoom in so it fits, or zoom out. So like, let's say I'm really far zoomed in and you can do zoom to fit. That's just going to fit everything in your document into the window. That keyboard shortcut is Shift 1. Now, Shift 1 is kind of an odd keyboard shortcut. Why would they have chosen Shift 1? Why don't they use Command or Control, which is more normal here? That's because, keep in mind that even though we're in a desktop app, it's also a website as well. So they have to choose keyboard shortcuts that are compatible in a web browser. And so sometimes you'll see that they're using like Shift for certain things that you might not be used to doing, which is just a little different and takes a little bit of getting used to, that you're not always holding Command or Control when doing those kind of keyboard shortcuts there. Yeah. And actually in the live chat, I see that there is a couple questions. For example, can Dreamweaver import an XD file since it's the same as an Adobe app? So Dreamweaver is a coding program, but it's best used as a way for you to write the code yourself. I don't know that they can import something like an XD file. Really, Dreamweaver is meant to be used as a code editor, that you write your own code. And as far as a code editor goes, I would say it's a very poor code editor. I would say to use something like Visual Studio Code or something like that. If you're relying on Dreamweaver to write code for you, you're going to get a bad result. So I would just say at this point, just let Dreamweaver go bye-bye and switch over to a proper code editor, something like Visual Studio Code, which is free by Microsoft, and you're going to have a much better coding experience. But you have to know the code. You have to know the HTML and CSS. You're not going to be relying on the program to write it for you. Also, there was a question about after you do your design in Figma or Adobe XD, can you take something like that into Wix? Wix is a consumer-oriented platform. As far as I know, they don't allow you to write code yourself. I'm not very familiar with Wix. I just know that every Wix website that I've ever seen has been a horrendous mess. So I've always had a bad experience with Wix. I've never tried it myself. It's meant for people that are non-designers, kind of just typical consumers, to be able to create a website for themselves. And from what I can tell, the coding of it has always been horrendous. So so I don't see Wix as a kind of professional platform which you would use for designing and then building a website. Typically, when you're designing a website in something like Figma or Adobe XD or Sketch, you would design it here and then you would hand it off to a developer to code. And pre-built platforms, often like things like Squarespace and so forth, Wix, they let you do certain things, but they don't just let you do whatever you want. So if you want to be able to do whatever you want, you'd have to use something where you can code everything yourself. So things like WordPress, for example, they let you write any code you want, and they just provide a content management system for you. And that's going to be a way that you can actually build the site properly using anything that you design in Figma. But don't think of Figma as I design and then I push a button and a website or app gets made. It's a process where a coder that knows what they're doing has to translate the design into a good quality coded final product. I know everybody wants that shortcut. They want to be able to just go right from design right to code, but it's a process that just takes time. All right, so getting back to the design part here. Yeah, so I was talking about those keyboard shortcuts that sometimes they're just a little bit different than you're used to, and that's because of the web app side of Figma. I'm going to delete these other artboards, or sorry, frames as they are called here in Figma, and I am going to do that zoom to fit keyboard shortcut. I'm going to do Shift-1 to zoom in to that, and on here I'm going to do a little bit of a design. I want to bring in a logo that I've got. Now, actually, before I do that, just a second, you can create things here. So there's different shapes that you can insert. You can click on your tool there, start to create things. Over here on the right, you can fill. You can add a stroke if you want to, and choose your color. Actually, let me go here to the size. Here's a cool little thing. Whenever you hover over an icon for something, you can drag left and right over that icon to scrub through that value. So now you can see that stroke a bit better. And of course, you can change the color of that stroke as you see fit. If you don't want that stroke anymore, you can go and remove that, of course. So you can create your shapes, you can resize them, you can round your corners, and so on. Anytime you want to create a new thing, you just go back up, choose the tool again, create your next thing. You keep always going back to the Move tool when you're done. So if you want to delete something, just hit delete on your keyboard to delete those things. So I want to bring in a logo, bring in a photo, start to create a couple pages here of my website. And so I want to import something. There's a little arrow here, which I can see all of the different shapes that I can create, but I can also place an image. So let me place an image here. And I'm going to go down to my class files here that I've got. And I've got a logo here. This is an SVG file. Now, SVGs are standard a scalable vector graphics. So SVG stands for scalable vector graphics. It's a way to get vector graphics between apps, especially digital apps, digital design apps. And I could just click to place that there, and it brings in, and notice that it's got all of the vectors in there. So that means that I can make this as big or small as I want. Now, make sure that when you're resizing that you hold Shift to keep that proportional. Otherwise, you're going to distort those graphics. You can make them as big or as small as you want, and they will always be crisp, clean, and sharp. SVGs can be saved out of any decent design app, so Adobe Illustrator can save them. You should, in Illustrator, if you're saving them, save them through not the save as commands. That's going to give you older, not so great code behind the scenes, because SVG files are actually coded files. In Illustrator, you should be exporting as an SVG to get a better quality SVG graphic out of it. But when you go to different libraries online, for example, feather icons. So with feather icons, this is just a library of different icons that you can download. There's lots of these types of libraries out there online. If you see one that you like, let's say you want this aperture icon or this arrow here, you can just click on it and it will download an SVG file, and you can import that into Figma. So pretty much any kind of vector graphic these days, a lot of them online are going to be supplied as an SVG, so it's a very standard format that you can use. Now, this has a black and white version in here, and I don't want the bottom one, I just want the top one. So I'm going to double click to go into that group, and then I can select the things that are in there. So let me double click and select the stuff that's in here. So oops, double click there, and I can go in and start deleting these things. You can hold shift and start to select things over here on the left, and then hit delete to delete them there. Okay, so, and it looks like there's something else little back there. All right. Okay, so I've got my logo here. I'm just going to put that right there. Now, as far as aligning up here, when you put this here, you can use your alignment buttons up here on the top right. You can choose right or left or center. And if you only have one object selected, it's going to do it to your frame. If you have multiple shapes selected, so if you've gone there and created multiple different shapes here, like so, oops, and you know what, did I? Oh, accidentally drew that one inside there. Let me hit delete to delete that. Didn't mean to do that. Started drawing one inside of my other shape. There we go. So I've got these different shapes here. Let me make those darker just so you can see them a little bit better. There we go. If you select multiple shapes, you can center or top align to each other. So it automatically senses, do you have multiple shapes? Then we will be aligning those to each other. So if I do this, we can align them left, center, or right to each other. But let's say you group that selection. So I can right click or control click and group that selection. Now that I only have one thing, I can center or left align that entire group, and now it's going to the entire frame instead, which is nice. Okay, so I'm going to pop this up here on the top in the middle, and it automatically lines it up to the middle, although I could use my left center buttons if I want to. Okay, now I want to put in a photo behind this. So I'm going to go and insert another image. So you can place in vector graphics, or you can place in photos and pixel-based graphics in here. And I'm going to do that with a location photo, this location photo here. And if I just click, it's going to bring it in at this absolutely giant size, which I don't want. So I'm going to do Command Z or Control Z on Windows. So I'm not going to just click to place it in there. When I place this image in, instead of clicking, place this image in again, I'm going to drag. And by dragging, it comes in at the size that I want. And as I resize this, another nice thing that it does is it keeps it kind of automatically scaling to fill this available space, which is quite nice. So it's staying centered, vertically centered, or horizontally centered. And depending on the aspect ratio of the image, it's always going to be fitting either the entire height and cropping off some of the width, or if this gets too short, then it might have to show the entire width and crop off some of the height that's there. And that is done because over here on the right, under image, under fill, you've got image. So we've got this set to fill. Now, if you set it to fit, then it would fit the entire image in, and you just have these empty areas of your container, if you will. So it kind of creates a rectangle for you, and it's like filling or fitting the image into that rectangle. And as I do this, if I want to go in and crop that and do something different, I'd have to go into these image options and choose to crop. Once I choose crop, then I can go to my image and I can start to scale it separately from the container that it's in. Just make sure that you hold Shift as you do this. And then you can position it within that container. Now, once you've done that though, let's say you close that. If you've done that as a crop, not fill or fit, be careful of resizing, because now you've said you want the image to look like that. And now, unless I hold Shift, it's going to stretch my image, which is not a good thing. So as you're resizing, make sure you hold Shift when that panel is not open. Now, if the panel's open, then you can go and you can adjust the container that you're sitting inside of, and then you can go to the edge of the image and you can do that. So it's only when you close that you're kind of done with the cropping, and now you're just sizing this, and now's when you'd have to hold Shift. So I'm going to put this up here behind my logo. I'm going to hold Shift, scale that up, and I actually want it to be behind the logo, so I'm going to drag that down underneath. There we go. So now it's behind. I'm not satisfied with the cropping of that though. Now, once you've put it to crop, you can double click to open up that crop stuff there and see those options real quick. So just double click. There you go. And actually, even before you set it to crop, you can do that. So like, let's say you place this image in, and let me just go grab another image just as a different example here. If I place this image in, if you double click, it pops that up. And you can quickly switch to crop, and you can be cropping that photo, and then just close it, and you're done. So double clicking will show those options, but it's going to default to fill. If you want to crop, you got to switch to crop. Okay, so I'm going to double click. Once that's open, now I can crop the photo here and get it situated the way I want and close that up. All right. Now, I want to show the whole workflow of kind of doing a little bit basic design, then prototyping, and then sharing. So once you've got one of your screens, and I know this is the most amazing screen you've ever seen designed. No, I'm just kidding. But let me create another screen over here, and I'm going to link the two. So let's say you want to do a menu, right? This is a cafe, so we want to do a menu. So I'm going to duplicate this frame. Now, when it comes to menus, let's say there's a duplicate command, but maybe you don't know what the keyboard shortcut for duplicate is. If you're on a Mac, you can go to Edit, and you see the whole Edit menu. And in here, you can see the duplicate command. On Windows, you don't get that top level menu. And if you're on a website in the web app, Figma.com, you don't get that menu either. So what will always work is going to the main Figma menu. You always have an edit menu there. This works on the Mac, on Windows, in the web app, that always works. And you can choose duplicate there. Only if you're on a Mac in the desktop app do you also get it up here. So why do I prefer this if you are on a Mac is because it's one less click. So if you're in the web app or compared to the Mac desktop app, you always have to go to that menu. So there's one click to go to edit. And I know it's only one click, but if you're going into menus a lot, that's a nice thing. I'm not sure why they don't do that for Windows. I would like the same thing on Windows as well, that you can be one click into a menu instead of having to always go into the Figma main menu. So if you're a Windows user, maybe ask Figma to give you top level menus in the Windows desktop app, because I think that would be a nice improvement. All right, so I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to go into Edit and choose Duplicate, which is the same thing as copy and paste all in one step, but boom, makes a quick duplicate. Now, these really shouldn't be called phone anymore. This first screen, I'm going to call this the home page frame, and I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to call this the menu page. And I want to shorten this up because on the menu page, I don't really need this super tall image. So I'm going to double click again to bring up my crop options, pull the bottom up, let's say like so. And now I have some more space for my content. And now I'm going to put some text down below. So I'm going to go to my type tool, and I'm going to click here, type out the word menu, and I'm going to go to set that to be center text so that as I change it, it'll be centered, but also I need it to be centered in my frame. So I'm going to click the center button there as well. And then I can go here to my size and choose a bigger size. And the reason I chose centered text is so that this will keep staying centered in my design here. Here's a neat little tip. If you want to quickly change size, you can hover over the divider between the weight and the size here. If you hover over one, it's a very small area, but if you hover over like the divider there, then you see those arrows. You can drag left and right to scrub through your font sizes. It's almost hidden. You can also click into your numerical value and use your up and down arrow keys to increase or decrease that as well. Single arrow keys, just an arrow by itself, will go 1 pixel at a time. If you do shift and your up and down arrows, then you will go 10 pixels at a time. Excuse me. But if you hover over that little divider line, see the arrows? That is a nice quick way to interactively change the size of that, which is nice. All right, so let me put that up there, holding shift. Now, as far as fonts go, this is where I want to remind you that you get Google Fonts, all your Google Fonts installed automatically. They're not really installed, just part of Figma that you can go and choose all of your Google Fonts. Just go in there and choose it. And all the various weights and all that good stuff. If you're working in the desktop app or you've installed the font service, then you will also get access to your local fonts as well. All right, so now let me move that down. Let me make that just a smidgen smaller. Doesn't need to be quite that big. Now I want to put this in a 2-column design. I want to bring in some photos down below, and I want to align them to some nice column guides. So I'm going to select this frame, and over here on the right, I'm going to add a layout grid. So layout grids are nice when we do all types of design, whether it's web design, app design, even print design. Designers over the years have often used grids to keep things aligned, keep things consistent, keep a nice framework for things. So I'm going to add a layout grid to this. And I don't want this graph paper style grid. So I'm going to click on that button here and switch this over to a column-based grid. That's the kind of grid that I want. And this is a mobile phone, so I'm not going to put too many columns here. If I was on a desktop, I would do 12 columns typically, because 12 columns can be subdivided into 1, 2, 3, or 4 column designs nicely. But on a mobile phone like this, 2 generally is fine. Maybe you go up to 6 kind of at a high end, but I want a 2-column design here, so I'm just going to choose 2. And I want a certain amount of gutter space in between. This is also where you can use your up and down arrow keys to increase or decrease that gutter, which is just an empty space that's going to be in between things. Let's say I do 30 pixels there. I can then go to my margins and also put 30 pixels of margin on the left and the right. So the gutter is in between your columns and the margins are on the outside of those. And now I have that nice column guide to go with. They are just guides. And the way that you're supposed to use these guides is that you would go through and you would set them up on your frames. In fact, what I should have done is selected both of the frames ahead of time before I would do this. But just to show you that, what if this was like a 6 and this one was a different one, just to show you that you can do different ones. When you go over here to this little eyeball and you hide it, you're just hiding it for that one frame. You are not hiding it for all the frames. You're kind of saying, I don't want to see that until I come back in and turn it back on. And if you want to globally kind of hide or show these, what you want to do is you want to go to your view menu. So under view here, you can hide and show your layout grids. This will globally hide and show your layout grids. And I'm going to be using this menu here. But just again, for any Mac user out there, of course, you can also go up to this menu and do the same thing there with one less click. But I'm going to keep doing the menu over here because this works across all platforms and the web. So the layout grids is what you want to choose to hide and show all your layout grids throughout all of your frames. If just on one frame you want to hide it just on that one, that's what that eyeball is for. But don't use that eyeball that's on the right as a typical hide and show, because what'll be annoying is, let's say you have 30 frames and you've hidden them, then you have to go through and you have to select those frames and show it again. This view menu option is meant as a global show and hide the layout grids. That's what you want to use. Okay, so I want to design on this grid now, so I'm going to go and insert an image to place into here. So I'll go place image and choose one of my photos here. I'm going to drag over that grid, and that looks good to me. Then I'm going to place in another one as well. Do one more here, and let's go to artichoke and do an artichoke here. I'm going to drag to place that there. And as I'm doing this here, you'll notice you'll get smart guides. It'll kind of help snap to each other, and that it will help to snap to other things on the page, like your grids. Okay, so I'm done with my grids. Now I can hide them. Go turn off my layout grids. And let's say my design is done, except I don't have a way to get over to the menu. So just as a real quick way, I'm just going to use my type tool here and just make a quick little button that just says go to, or I'll just say view menu. That's what I'll do. Okay, so view menu. And I'll just make that just a smidgen smaller there. Okay. So I want to be able to click view menu to go over to the other frame. This brings us to prototyping. So first you design, then you want to prototype, and then you want to share. So prototype is over here on the right. We have design, prototype, and then later we'll share. But inspect would also be kind of part of sharing. So I'm going to design. Now I go to prototype. Notice that this device is already set to the iPhone mini because that's the device that I chose when I created the frame. So that's already chosen. You can choose which style of one you want. So if you want to choose a different color, you can. You can also change the background here that this is being presented on. I think black is fine. And so that's your just basic setup there. Once I select something, then what you'll notice is there'll be a little circle here, and I can hover over that for the plus, and I'm going to drag over to the other frame, and now I've linked that to that frame. When I tap it, it's going to go over there, and what type of animation is it going to use? If we want to do some sort of animation, now let's say in a web page you don't animate things, so you would just leave it on instant, but we could have it do like a little slide in there. That's kind of cool. So if you want to see the preview, you can hover over that little preview there so it kind of slides in. That's kind of cool. You can have it slide in from different directions. I'll just have it slide in from the right. That's good. All right, so that added an interaction. And now I can preview that. So there's a button up here at the top right for present. So we're going to present this and see how this looks. If you're in a browser, this would pop open either a new browser tab or a new browser window. If you're in Safari, Safari typically blocks those windows by default. So there'll be a little button up in the URL bar that you'll have to click on to allow the pop-up to open. So just keep that in mind. And so this opened up a different tab here. So my file's still over here. This is just a new tab for my present. And I can click and I can go there. Pretty cool. You can also use your arrow keys to navigate back and forth in case you have not made interactions to get you from place to place. The other thing you can also do is if let's say you've gotten over to this other frame and you want to restart it, you can go down here to the bottom right and click restart, which will go back to your first frame that you're starting with. If you ever want to make changes in your design, you can go back and make changes to those. So let's say I want to make this a different color. I can go back to my design tab and choose another color here, and then click my present. It still keeps that interaction, of course, that you've added. You just change the design of it like so. Okay. If your frame is taller than the device that you set up, so let's say you've made this taller because maybe you're going to have a bunch of these menu items. I'm going to just pull off some copies of those real quick there. And then when you're doing your present, you're going to have the opportunity to scroll down to those additional things. So you can scroll there. All right. So in terms of the steps, you design, you prototype, you preview that with present, and then you're ready to share it with, let's say, a client, with developers, with users for doing user testing. So that brings us to sharing here. And here you can choose what you want people to be able to do in terms of collaboration, right? So you want to send it to other people. And I should probably give this a name actually first. Let me just click up here to give this a name. So this is going to be called the 4A Cafe. There we go. So let me give a share here. If you just want somebody to be able to view it. So let's say anybody with the link can view. So clients can view it, developers can view it. You could say only people you invite can have access to it. And then you can put in stuff here and you can type in somebody's email address. And then you can choose, you know, are they going to be able to edit it? Are they going to be able to view it? When you copy the link, that would be for people with anyone with the link there can view. So let's say I'm sending this to a client. Anybody with the link can view. So let's copy that and let's go to a browser. I'm going to go to a browser here and do like an incognito. So it's like I'm not signed in. So open up a private window here and it's new private window. There we go. So I'm not logged into any account. This is what a client would see when they just log in. Or should I say, not log in, but go to view the link. So they're not logged in. They don't have an account. And oh, look, there I am. There's Dan. In fact, if I start moving around in the document here, going to someplace, like let's say I go there, you can see that I've selected that, and there I am. So they can actually navigate around the file. They can command plus and minus. They can zoom in and out. They can choose the zoom over here. They can pan around if they log in with an account. So if they create an account, either create one with the Google account or sign up with their own Figma account, because remember, there's the free Figma plan. If they sign in and create a Figma account, then they can comment. But if they don't sign in, then they can't leave comments. They can view it. They can click the present button up here at the top right. And let's go to preferences and allow pop-ups from Figma. So that'll open up a new tab there. And so they can do the present as well and get to see that and see that it works. And if they, let's say they log in, if they have an account, so they can log in. I'm going to log in with just a free plan here. And I said that anybody with the link can view it. I didn't say that they can edit it. So let's say I'm a client, I'm logging in, I have a free account, because I'm not paying for Figma, I'm just a client, whether you pay for Figma or not. And in here, I can select things, of course I can still present. And if I'm a developer, I can even go in and I can export graphics from here. I can inspect this and see how big things are. I can click on one thing, hover over something else and see how much space is there. I can see the font. I can see the color. There's some CSS that I can get. So if there was things like border radiuses and stuff that I needed to get, I could get that from here. So it helps for sending this stuff to developers. And then I can also comment as well. There's a commenting tool up here, commenting panel over here, and I can click on something and then I can say, I don't like this font. And then that way I will know that they don't like that font and I can go and change that. So they're in the Figma app here, but they just have kind of limited permissions as far as what they can do because they can view it. But it's kind of amazing actually how much they can do, because they can comment, they can present, they can export graphics. So a developer can export graphics for themselves, which is pretty cool that they can do that. Now, when I do when I do share in the file, then I'm going to send people directly into that view. If, however, I go to present and I share from the present side, then you're sharing the prototype, they'll drop right into this view. So if you don't want people to go through this view to get to the presentation, then share it from the prototype itself. And that's going to be a more seamless experience for people sharing from that prototype on that side. So you design, you prototype, you share. That is the process of using Figma. So let's go back to the slide deck here and just wrap up a couple things. Let's do a brief comparison about Figma versus Adobe XD versus Sketch. Sketch is Mac only. Figma and Adobe XD, they work on both Mac and PC. And of course, Figma is a web browser, so technically it works anywhere that you have a web browser. So it even works on Linux. Figma only works online. Files must be stored online. Adobe XD and Sketch, they do work online, or they let you work locally. For some certain industries, that's important. If you're doing things like pharmaceutical or legal stuff, sometimes those industries don't allow your files for legal reasons to go to somebody else's servers. They must be stored securely on your own servers. So for some people, that's an issue that they want to be able to store the files locally. Now, they don't get all the features of Adobe XD and Sketch because some things like collaboration require it to be a cloud document. So I would say most people, this is not an issue, but it's just something to consider, that if you need access to local files, working locally, saving files locally, working locally, you're not going to get the online collaboration part, but Adobe XD and Sketch let you work locally or online. Figma is only online. There is no choice. That is the only thing that it can do. Sketch does not have a free plan. They have a 30-day free trial, but they do not have a free plan. Adobe XD has what they call a free starter version, much like Figma's free starter version. It has limitations which are much more restrictive than Figma's. Figma, you can do quite a lot of stuff with the free plan. So the Figma free plan is going to be much more usable for a greater amount of people. The free plan from Adobe XD is definitely much more limiting. So yeah, they have it, but you're going to do more with the Figma free plan. When it comes to cost, they're pretty similar. As we mentioned before, Sketch is slightly cheaper than Adobe XD, which is slightly cheaper than Figma. And so even though Figma is the most expensive, for the normal plans, we're only talking $3 a month, so it's not that much more expensive. Unless you're a Creative Cloud user and you already have Adobe XD, then you're paying the full extra cost. So pretty similar in cost. Sketch has the most limited prototyping features, and there's no animation that you can do. Figma and Adobe XD have definitely considerably stronger prototyping and animation features. Adobe XD is the best at opening a variety of files. So Adobe XD can open up Sketch, Photoshop, Illustrator. They know that they were kind of late to the game, and they're like, you can open up anything and switch to Adobe XD. They wanted to make it as easy as possible to switch. And they're Adobe, so of course they can open up Photoshop and Illustrator files. Figma can only open up Figma and Sketch files. So their thinking is, well, Sketch was the first. We want to let people switch from Sketch over to Figma, so we'll open those files. Sketch can only open up Sketch files. It can't open up any other kind of file. Again, there might be online converters to convert things like Photoshop files over, and there might be certain workarounds that you can do. But in terms of just simply opening it, Sketch can only open up Sketch files. Because it's Adobe is going to integrate their apps, of course. So XD better integrates with Photoshop and Illustrator. You can open the files. You can send your files over to After Effects from Adobe XD if you want to animate them beyond the capabilities of Adobe XD, which is kind of interesting. And while Figma had the early lead in online collaboration, Adobe XD and Sketch have both added online collaboration too. It's done in slightly different ways, but for the most part, they're all cloud documents. They work pretty similarly. I'd say the biggest difference is that comments are not integrated directly into the app with XD and Sketch. It's nice that in Figma, that when you're in the app, that you can see your comments. Like here, I can see this comment right here. Okay, you don't like that font. I can actually reply to it within the app. When you do things in Sketch and Adobe XD, you have to go to the web version of it to see those comments. Like there's a website, and it's not the native app. It's not editable there. It's just comments are separate. So it's nice having comments integrated into Figma. It just makes it easier to see and respond to them. In general, Sketch is just starting to fall behind in terms of features, especially when it comes to prototyping and animation. Figma and XD just have a much stronger feature set these days. And overall, I'd say that Figma's probably a stronger feature set than it's probably the strongest, but I do think that Adobe XD can be a bit easier initially to learn and use. I think it's just a bit of a simpler interface. Figma's a little bit bigger. The interface I don't think is quite as intuitive, but it's really very similar. I'm kind of nitpicking there. But in terms of like overall feature set, Figma probably has a bit more features than XD. They're pretty close, and there's some pros and cons for each one of them. But overall, Figma is probably a stronger feature set. And currently, in terms of the job market, the way that we're seeing things is that we're seeing more jobs asking for Figma and Sketch. Sketch because it was the early lead in this. They had a 6-year head start on XD and Figma. So Figma and Sketch kind of seem to be in the lead, with Adobe XD kind of third. But it's Adobe, so I don't count them out. It's part of the Creative Cloud, so definitely Adobe users are kind of preferring XD. XD and Figma are both good apps. So it just depends on kind of what your needs are. I'm going to be doing a webinar that goes much more in depth, specifically comparing features. So there'll be much more detail in that webinar if you're interested in learning more about comparing all three of them. And as far as learning more, we have a Figma Bootcamp that you can check out on our website, which is nobledesktop.com. That's a hands-on class where you actually get to do exercises. There's demonstration and hands-on practice. In there, you get a step-by-step workbook that you can use to go back over practice exercises later, even after the class. It's a great training there if you want to learn more about Figma. We also have a UX and UI design certificate where you'll not only learn Figma, but you'll also learn about UX and UI design as well. We have a variety of classes in UX as well as UI or web design or visual design, whatever you want to call those. Depends on who you're talking to, but a variety of classes in those subjects there. So hope to see you in a future class, and I hope this has been useful for you in getting started with Figma. And if you're interested in learning more about Figma versus Sketch and Adobe XD, be sure to check out that webinar that I'm doing. If you're watching this live, that's going to be in the future, but if you're watching the recording, that might already be up here on our YouTube channel. For the link to this presentation, just check out the video description down below, and you'll be able to get that link, nobledesktop.com/presentation/Figma. And so thanks so much for attending, and hope to see you in a class. By the way, our classes can be done both live in person in New York City or live online. So you can attend virtually. All of our class times are held Eastern time, so because we're based in New York City. But any of them can be done virtually. If you want to attend them, but you can't make it to New York City, then you can certainly do those online. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a great day.